Hey guys, how's it going? Jordan Locke here reporting on some very sad news coming out of Minnesota today regarding the efforts to get Donald Trump off of the election ballots for 2024. Now, for those of you who don't know, there has been a concerted effort in several states to try and get Donald Trump off of the ballots due to the fact that he is a criminal and tried to incite an insurrection. You'd think that something like this would not be difficult to get accomplished, but it's proving to be a lot more difficult than a lot of people anticipated. So per CNN today, Minnesota Supreme Court blocks bid to remove Trump from primary ballots next year based on the 14th Amendment's insurrection clause, but said the challengers can try again to block him from the general election ballot if the former president wins the Republican nomination. The 14th Amendment, ratified after the Civil War, says the U.S. officials who take an oath to uphold the Constitution are banned from future office if they engaged in insurrection, which is what Trump did. But the Constitution doesn't say how to enforce the ban, and it has only been applied twice since 1919, which is why many experts view these challenges as a long shot. At oral arguments earlier this month, several of the justices appeared skeptical of removing Trump from the ballot. One justice said it might be prudent to exercise judicial restraint, while another nodded to the idea that voters should probably be the ones who decide whether Trump returns to the presidency. Similar anti-Trump challenges are still ongoing in Colorado and Michigan. The cases have been handled by left-leaning advocacy groups, but a bipartisan array of legal scholars and former jurists have endorsed their attempts to disqualify Trump from office. Regardless of the initial rulings in these cases, most experts anticipate appeals that go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which could settle the issue for the entire nation. So, unfortunately, it looks like the efforts to get Donald Trump off of the election ballot for 2024 so far have hit a roadblock. This is something, as I mentioned in the article, that several states are trying to do. This particular states that we're referring to are Minnesota and Colorado. Those are two of the states that are attempting to get him off of the election ballot. Now, you may recall that in the previous election, both Minnesota and Colorado went Democratic. So you might be thinking to yourself, why are these states trying to get Trump off of the election ballot? It's not so much for these particular states. It's more to set a precedent, right? If these states can get Trump off of the election ballot for inciting an insurrection, then maybe other swing states can do the same thing. Now, make no mistake about it. Let's be clear. Trump is a criminal who incited an insurrection. Aside from the insurrection, he's facing 91 indictments as of today. So this is not somebody who's supposed to be leading this nation. This is not somebody who should be leading this nation. This is not someone who is mentally competent to hold any office, let alone the office of the President of the United States. Now, I found this article regarding the effort to get Trump off of the election ballots for the 2024 presidential election. This article is from theguardian.com, and it's pretty interesting, has a lot of really good facts for you, so I'm going to read it here. U.S. courts hear efforts to remove Trump from 2024 ballot. Will they work? When Scott Gessler stepped up to the lectern in a Denver courtroom on Monday, he opened with a full-throated defense of American democracy. When it comes to decide who should lead our nation, it's the people of the United States of America who should make those decisions, he said. This court should not interfere with the fundamental value, that rule of democracy. I think it's interesting that Scott Gessler sits here and talks about the fact that a court should not interfere with democracy while trying to defend an individual who tried to end democracy in this country almost 4 years ago. It's the juxtaposition there is very interesting. It wasn't so much the argument that was significant as much as who Gessler was representing, Donald Trump. Surprise, surprise. The same Donald Trump who fought doggedly to have courts, state legislators, his vice president, and members of Congress throw out valid electoral slates from several states and declare him the winner of the 2020 presidential election. And guys, the efforts to subvert democracy go back way further than the 2020 election. For example, I'm not sure if you remember, but there was a whole big fiasco going on where Trump was really worked up about mail-in ballots, and he went so far as to have mail processing machines removed. Do you guys remember that? He had over 50% of mail processing machines removed across the country so that the post office would not have the capacity to handle all of the mail-in ballots that were going to come in, because he knew that the mail-in ballots would heavily be Democratic. And so having the head postmaster remove mail processing machines to process mail ballots, that is subverting democracy. Calling the Georgia election officials and asking them to find votes is subverting democracy. Inciting a riot that then goes to the Capitol and attempts to overthrow the elected government is subverting democracy. So I think it's very interesting that this guy, Scott Gessler, makes this argument here. It is not only one of its kind. The Minnesota Supreme Court heard a similar case this week, and there's also a similar case already pending in Michigan, a key battleground state. And, like we mentioned before, that's where this is going to come in handy. It's not so much for the states that already voted Democratic and are most likely going to vote Democrat next year. It's more for the key battleground states, Michigan being one of those states. States are tasked with ensuring that candidates from office meet the qualifications so that the challenges to Trump's candidacy are bubbling up through the state court. The 14th Amendment cases are part of a mosaic of legal efforts that seek to hold Trump and his allies accountable for overturning the 2020 election, but they are among the most important. While the cases are dry steeped in legalese and historical understanding of constitutional text, they get at Trump in a way that none of these other suits can, blocking his return to political life. While the other cases could require Trump and his allies to face jail time, lose their law licenses, and pay damages for defamatory lies, none of them could block Trump from running for president for 2024. A criminal conviction does not disqualify someone, surprisingly, from running for president or serving as president. That is insane. That's insane to me. I actually never knew that. If he wins the election, he could theoretically pardon himself in a federal case against him or dismiss the prosecutions. And while no pardon would be available in the Georgia criminal case, it is untested whether the Constitution would allow a state to incarcerate a serving elected president. Simply put, winning the election is widely seen as Trump's best chance at escaping the criminal charges against him. Losing the 14th Amendment cases would cut off that possibility. So that is why these cases that are going through the courts right now to get Trump off of the ballots due to his criminal status are so important. They're literally the only cases that would stop him from running for president next year. Let me be clear. The purpose of our actions is to obtain rulings that Trump is disqualified from the ballot, not merely to have a political debate. Not at all to have a political debate. Not merely to air issues, said Ron Fain, the legal director for Free Speech for People, a left-leaning group that filed the challenge in Minnesota. The dangers of Trump ever being allowed back into public office are exactly those foreseen by the framers of Section 3, which is that they knew that if an oath-taking insurrectionists were allowed back into power, they would do the same thing, if not worse. The 14th Amendment measure was passed after the Civil War and has never been used to block a presidential candidate from the ballot. It picked up steam this summer after a pair of conservative scholars authored a law review article saying that it applied to Trump. Trump's lawyers have defended him, arguing that his conduct on January 6 did not amount to an insurrection, that Congress needs to pass a law to enforce the 14th Amendment, and that its language does not apply to the president. But expert witnesses for the challengers in the Colorado case offered a wealth of historical and other evidence this week, suggesting that what Trump did on January 6 was an insurrection as the framers of the 14th Amendment would have understood it. Legal observers almost universally agree that the U.S. Supreme Court, where Trump appointed 3 of 6 members of the court's conservative supermajority, will ultimately decide the issue and whether Trump is eligible to run for re-election. There is no clear legal consensus, and since the law is so untested, it is not clear what the court will do. So guys, this article goes on a bit further. I think the crux of what they're saying here is that this has never been tried before. This is unprecedented. But then again, I don't think a sitting president has ever tried to lead an insurrection against a democratically voted candidate. So there are lots of precedents here. Unfortunately. Now, sadly, the Supreme Court is very conservative. So if these cases went all the way up to the Supreme Court, it is unlikely that these cases would be successful, but you never know. This is a very stressful time, I think, for everybody in this country. It's so scary to think about the fact that almost half of the individuals who live in this country are okay voting for a guy who has 91 indictments against him and who tried to overthrow the democratically elected government of this country, a democratically elected candidate. Like, these things happened in 2020, and we live in a country where here in 2023, almost half of the country is okay to look beyond that. You might ask yourself why these people are okay with looking beyond that, and the reason is very simple. Republicans don't vote based on logic or common sense. The Republican Party appeals to Republican voters' base insecurities, right? And these insecurities have to do with xenophobia. It has to do with demonizing everybody who doesn't look like you and saying that these people are all coming for your jobs. They're coming for your neighborhoods. You have to be careful. You have to be aware. That is how the Republican Party operates, right? So when you appeal to the deepest insecurities of these, unfortunately, quite often uneducated voters, they're not going to care about the legalities of these situations. They're not going to care about what logic dictates or common sense. They're just going to go with the candidate who appeases their insecurities the best. And let's be clear, Donald Trump knows exactly what he's doing. He knows how he's playing these uneducated voters. And these uneducated voters, which make up almost half of this country, are the people who give Donald Trump an actual chance after everything he's done to run for office again and possibly be elected president again. Scary times, guys. I will be here reporting on this entire situation as it develops. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this, and I will see you soon. Take care.